Good morning, ladies and gentlemen, and thank you for taking the time to join our webinar today. Over the next 40 minutes or so, we're going to explain you the new EU guidance notes for the classification of colouring foods. And at the end of the process, we're going to be responding to any questions that you might raise. Firstly, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce your presenters today. This will be myself, Paul Collins, together with my colleague, Mrs. Silke Faller. We're very pleased to have this opportunity to give you an insight into these very important and new guidance notes and to explain the related consequences and necessary actions. Both Silke and I have been involved in the guidance notes from the very beginning, and we've worked together with our regulatory affairs team to ensure that for our customers and their consumers that colouring foods indeed have a very bright future. So, what are we going to cover today? Silke and I would like to take you through the guidance notes by explaining the need for such guidance, the process that we followed or that was followed, the key principles addressed, any resulting consequences, of course the status of EXBERRY colouring foods, our product, and finally what this means for authorities, the food industry and consumers. Before coming to the guidance notes themselves, what I would like to do is to take this opportunity to shortly introduce GNT to those of you who might not be so familiar, and to the concept of colouring foods before we go deeper into the detail. GNT is a family-owned company. We operate on a global scale, and we've been involved in colouring foods for more than 30 years. Therefore, we can rightfully claim to be the pioneers of colouring foods, and we've earned this position of being the market and innovation leader in the category of colouring foods. Our headquarters are located in the Netherlands, where we also have our main manufacturing facility. In addition to this, we have a further manufacturing facility in Germany. One other very important aspect of GNT that I'd like to emphasize today is that we have full supply chain control, we would say from seed to shelf. And this is vital with colouring foods to ensure quality, authenticity and availability. To serve our customers and markets, we have a number of affiliates in key locations where we have a local team of experts who provide technical, application, regulatory and customer service support to our customers on a global scale. Now, before going into the guidance notes, I would firstly like to explain you some of the key principles surrounding colouring foods. Clearly the starting point has to be a food, this is without question, and for GNT this means fruits, vegetables and other edible plants. The process itself cannot result in a selective extraction of the pigments. This is actually, as you'll come to see, a key objective of the guidance notes to define this important parameter. And for GNT we only use physical processes and water to assist in the processing. It is perhaps important to mention at this stage that we do not use any organic solvents. I'm now going to hand over to Silke, who will take you through the guidance notes in more detail.
Good morning. My name is Silke Faller, and I will go through the details of the guidance notes on the classification of food extracts with coloring properties. The importance of the guidance notes is that they define coloring foods within the EU, and also they define the differentiation to additive colors. Within the EU, both additive colors and coloring foods can be used to color food and beverage products. Additive colors are clearly defined by the EU regulation on food additives, and they need to comply with the EU purity criteria for colors. Both artificial and non-artificial, or sometimes called natural colors, are additives. They have to be labeled on the ingredient list with the category color and then with the E number or the name of the color. To date, coloring foods had no legal framework within the EU, and there have been many discussions how to differentiate these from additive colors. Now, the guidance notes define this gap in the legislation. The European Commission started to develop the guidance notes in 2007, but even before, in fact since 1995, there have been many discussions on this matter. The objective of the guidance notes is to define coloring foods and to define the term selective extraction of the pigments relative to the nutritive or aromatic constituents, because this is the term which defines additive colors in the EU regulation on food additives. In 2009, the European Commission decided to perform a road test in order to define the selective extraction criteria and the quantitative borderline based on the existing products on the market. The European Commission has asked the manufacturers of coloring foods to provide data on their products. GNT was involved as a main stakeholder in this process. At the beginning of this year, the European Commission presented the outcome of the road test to the member states and introduced the threshold value to the borderline with an enrichment factor of 6. Just recently, in the last meeting of the Standing Committee on 29th November, the guidance notes were adopted, and since a few days they were published on the website of the European Commission. The guidance notes apply from the 1st of January 2014, and all products on the market have to comply with the guidance notes after 29th November 2015. Now, coming to the details of the guidance notes. They have incorporated a decision tree which lists the key questions. These are the following. So first, the question, is the coloring product primarily used for its coloring effect? This is mostly the case for coloring foods or additive colors. If a coloring product is used mainly for its aromatic properties and delivers only a secondary coloring effect, then it's seen as a flavor and is not a coloring food. So for example, if a paprika extract is used in fruit gums, and this is usually only for its coloring effect and not to impart the paprika flavor into fruit gums. The second question is if the coloring product is made from a source material which is a food or a characteristic ingredient of food. And third and the final question is if the source material has undergone selective extraction. This refers to the selective extraction criteria section, which I will explain you on the next slide. So in summary, when the coloring product is used for its primary coloring effect, the source material is a food or a characteristic ingredient of food and is not selectively extracted, then the product in question is a coloring food. When the source material is not a food, then the coloring product might be an additive color. Also, when the product is selectively extracted, then it cannot be a coloring food. In this case, it is then considered as an additive color, and the important question becomes, is it permitted or not permitted? So, coming to the details on the selective extraction criteria section within the guidance notes, which covers two criterion, C1 and C2. So C1 asks if the characteristic properties of the source material are retained. C2 asks if the pigments in relation to the nutritive and aromatic constituents is significantly different in the coloring product in comparison to the same ratio in the source material. As you will remember, the definition of a color is when the pigments are selectively extracted in relation to the nutritive or aromatic constituents. So, if it is selectively extracted either on nutritive or aromatic properties, then question C2 is answered with yes, and it is an additive color. If it's not selectively extracted on both ratios, so nutritive and aromatic, then question C2 is answered with no, and if the characteristic properties are still retained, question C1 is yes, then it's a coloring food. In order to provide clear and consistent criteria, the Commission and the Member States decided to define a quantitative threshold value for selective extraction by defining an enrichment factor. This enrichment factor, on first view, might seem a little bit complicated, but it's rather simple. There are two enrichment factors, one based on the nutritive constituents, Fn, and one based on the aromatic constituents, FF. The enrichment factor reflects the definition of an additive color. For the enrichment factor based on the nutritive constituents, it's the relation of the pigment content to the nutritive constituents in the coloring product in comparison to the same relation of pigment to nutritive constituents in the source material. For example, the enrichment factor for a carrot concentrate is based on the pigment content of the primary concentrate in relation to the nutritive constituents of the primary concentrate in comparison to the pigment content to the nutritive constituents in carrots. For a practical approach, total solids are defined as the reference value for nutritive constituents. Any added substances, for example the total solid content of added sugar, has to be deducted from the total solid content of the coloring product. The principle of the enrichment factor for the aromatic constituents is rather similar, whereas there is no practical reference for the total content of aromatic constituents. It is also stated in the guidance notes that as a practical approach, in most cases, the assessment based on the nutritive constituents does apply in many cases and brings the assessment to a final conclusion. Depending on the outcome of the enrichment factor, the threshold value for selective extraction is above 6. This means when the product has an enrichment factor greater than 6, then it means it is selectively extracted and considered as an additive color. When the factor is below 6, then it's not selectively extracted and classified as a coloring food. The guidance notes also include an example of two different carrot root extracts, A and B, in Annex 4. Carrot root extract A has an enrichment factor based on nutritive and aromatic constituents below 6, and this product is clearly a coloring food. The other product has an enrichment factor based on nutritive constituents of 40 and based on aromatic constituents of 1.2. This product is considered as selectively extracted. Due to the fact that this additive color does not comply with the purity criteria, it is not permitted and cannot be used for coloring purposes. This means that the guidance notes have consequences and will impact on products on the market today. The necessary actions are demonstrated in the following. If a finished product contains a coloring product which is currently on the market and needs to be assessed against the guidance notes, it could result that this coloring product is a coloring food. In this case, the product is a legal coloring food. It has to be in compliance with the key legislation for coloring foods, and in this case, then no further actions are needed. However, if this product is classified as an additive color, then it needs to be checked if this additive color is listed as a permitted color within the EU. If not, then it is not legal and can no longer be used. If yes, then the next question, does the additive comply with the purity criteria? For the carrot example in Annex 4, which I have mentioned before, it needs to have minimum 5% pigment content. If this is not the case, then it is not permitted. If this is the case, then the next question is if the final application may contain additive colors. For example, pasta is not allowed to be colored with additive colors. In this case, it is not permitted. The final question is if the level of use of this additive is within the defined maximum level of the specific application. If yes, then the product is a legal additive color and the label needs to be changed. If no, then also the dose level needs to be reduced and also the product needs to be labeled as an additive color. EXBERRY products have been coloring foods in the past and they remain coloring foods based on the new EU guidance notes. So you will see on this slide that EXBERRY products are legal coloring foods and no further action is required and our customers can continue to use them as coloring foods. As I mentioned before, the guidance notes listed an example in Annex 4 of the carrot root extract B with an enrichment factor based on the nutritive constituents of 40, which is clearly above 6 and considered as an additive color. In this case, it is a permitted color additive E160A, but due to the fact that it does not comply with the purity criteria, it cannot be used any longer for the purpose of coloring and is therefore not legal any longer and has to be replaced. So EXBERRY products are mainly used for coloring purpose. They are manufactured by physical processes from fruits, vegetables and or edible plants. EXBERRY products retains the nutritive constituents and also the aromatic properties of the source material. EXBERRY products are not selectively extracted, they have an enrichment factor below 6. Therefore, EXBERRY products are classified as coloring foods. GNT recommends to label EXBERRY products on the ingredient list of the final product as coloring food, in brackets the name of the source material. The labeling of coloring foods is not defined within the guidance notes. There is also no specific legal framework for the labeling of coloring foods within the EU so far, so this might be a topic for the future. Now I would like to pass back to Paul, who will explain you what the guidance notes mean for the food industry and finally for the consumer.
So, thank you, Silke. I would now like to bring this webinar towards its close by considering what it actually means for industry. The first and very important point is that coloring foods have a very clear legal status, which is now well defined, and this will ensure that any decisions are consistent throughout all EU member states. For GNT, our EXBERRY products have always been considered as coloring foods, and the guidance notes fulfill their purpose and serve to reaffirm that status as coloring foods. Clearly there are some coloring products on the market today which are positioned as coloring foods and that do not or will not comply with the guidance notes. As Silke highlighted a few moments ago, the example of carrot root extract B, as given within the guidance notes under Annex 4, is one such example. Such products, if they are deemed as not permitted additives for whatever reason, they would need to be replaced, or in some cases it might be necessary to have a label change or indeed a reduced level. In any case, where a coloring food alternative is required or necessary or desired, at GNT we would be delighted to support you with any application challenges that might bring forth. So in effect, the guidance notes bring certainty and clarity, which is vital for the food industry, both manufacturers, retailers, and of course ultimately consumers, who are rightfully looking for what they understand to be natural colours in their terms. Just shortly continuing with the topic of consumers, what I would like to share with you now is one slide, which is a result from a consumer insight study that GNT commissioned recently, which shows very clearly the fit between colouring foods and consumers' understanding of natural colour. You can see the remarkable consistency across 5 member states to this question of consumers who agree that such colouring foods are the most natural way to colour food. At GNT, we offer a comprehensive support and service package for customers, which extends to application support, both in the case of project work or indeed training workshops and seminars. We can also assist with colour replacement or colour matching and any related stability testing that might be necessary to support that. Our support then extends to regulatory matters, which is an area where we can provide expert know-how and assistance, and in our opinion a very important competence that we can offer to customers. So finally, on behalf of Zilka and myself, I would like to thank you for your attention today and also for the many questions that have been submitted throughout the webinar. Since there are so many questions, we will now deal with those that we can within the webinar. However, we will respond to the others after the event. So thank you very much. So before coming to the questions that you've submitted, and once again thank you very much for these, we firstly would like to invite you to participate in a short polling. So we have 2 polling questions which we would appreciate you to respond to. So our first polling question is, do you already use colouring foods for colour within your products? And here you have 4 answers. So yes, in many applications, yes, but only in a few applications, no, but you would like to understand more, or not at the moment. So if I could ask you to choose the appropriate answer, that would be very kind.
Okay, Paul, what do you think what will be the choice of the audience? What do you expect?
That's a good question, Zilka. What I would say, as a salesperson, I have 2 sides. One is that I hope many people are already using colouring foods, so we did a good job selling them. I also think it would be nice that there are customers who are wanting to use colouring foods, so maybe we should take a look at the results and see what amount of work I have to do. So if we go to the results of the poll, thank you for completing it. So as you can see, we have many users of existing users of colouring food, and of course also interest in learning more. And we hope this webinar has contributed to that learning from a regulatory perspective. So now let's go to the second polling question. So this is the second and final polling question, then we will come on to your important questions. So which is the most important benefit of colouring foods? And here we offer 5 of the key benefits. So is it that they are food ingredients and not additives, so clean label? Is it their fit with the consumer perception of natural colour? Is it that they provide vibrant and stable colour solutions? Is it that they meet with all dietary requirements, including kosher, halal, vegetarian, vegan, etc.? Or finally, that they can offer colour solutions with potential for global compliance. So Zilka, you asked me a question, so now I perhaps could ask you, what would you take as your most important benefit?
Yeah, there are many important benefits for colouring foods, but when I look at the possible, I think that for consumers it's a very important aspect to have food coloured with fruits and vegetables. So yeah, my choice would be for the consumer.
Okay, thank you, Silke. So let's take a look at the results of the poll and what we see from the results. Maybe we go to the results slide. I hope you have it in front of you. So we see that the most significant percentage is towards the food ingredients and not additives clean label. Of course, this somehow relates to the consumer anyway, because clean label is driven by meeting a consumer need. So I think options 1 and 2, of course, are quite closely related. So thank you, ladies and gentlemen, for joining the poll. That's very much appreciated. What we would now like to do is to go to the important questions that you've raised throughout the webinar. We've had quite a number of questions. So what I would like to do to make the question and answer session easy to feedback is to group the questions under some key headings. If we don't answer the question you've put in exactly the words that you quoted, then we've taken, this is because we've taken, there are a number of questions that are in the same direction, and we've tried to generalize the question for everybody's benefit. So firstly, under the general heading of classification decisions. So here we have 4 questions that we would like to share with you. So the first question is, are the guidance notes creating either a new law or a new regulation? So Silke, maybe you could take this question for me.
Mm-hmm. So the guidance notes on the classification of food extracts with coloring properties are European guidelines. So they are not an EU regulation or an EU directive. However, due to the fact that coloring foods are not described within the existing EU legislation, the enforcement authorities, but also industry, will use the guidance notes for the differentiation to additive colors and coloring foods. So even though they are only a guideline, the guidance notes may have factual legal effect and are similar to a new EU law.
Okay, thank you, Silke. So now we take the second question under this heading of classification. This is going a little bit deeper into the detail of the guidance notes. So the question is it correct that for classification, both the pigment to nutritive and pigment to aromatic have to be considered? So again, Silke, maybe you could take this question.
Yeah, this is a very good point, because the question about if it's both nutritive, pigment to nutritive and pigment to aromatic was a fundamental discussion during the whole discussion. And in the final version of the guidance notes, it states that both ratios have to be considered. However, for practical purpose, it's suggested that the classification should be based primarily on the nutritive enrichment factor. In these cases, where it's not feasible to also check the aromatic enrichment factor due to the specific character of the source material.
Okay, thank you, Silke. So the third question we have under this section is whether one might expect any negative impact relating to colouring products that are on the market today. So a question for myself. So it is likely that some products on the market, extracts, which might be produced by an organic solvent extraction, where they do not contain a significant amount of nutritive constituents, that they will not comply with the guidance notes, and therefore will not continue to be considered as colouring food. A clear example of this is actually the example that we mentioned during the presentation, which is within the guidance notes with carrot root extract B, which is within Annex 4, where it is made quite clear that in this specific case the product does not fulfill the criteria, and because of its insufficient purity relating to the purity criteria for additives, is then considered as a not permitted additive colour. So, and the final question under this section, which a little bit relates to the question we just asked, and is also a very interesting question, is whether a colouring food can be labeled as a flavor or as a flavoring substance. So again, Zilka, if you would take this question, please.
Yeah, okay. So this question is also a very good question, because if the main purpose of use of an extract is for coloring, then it is not correct to label this then as a flavor. So in fact, this means when a manufacturer uses extracts, and they have to determine they first will have to determine for which purpose they use this product. If it's for aromatic properties, then it's a flavor and then can also be labeled as a flavor. When it's used for coloring, like for example the paprika in fruit gums, which I have mentioned in the presentation, or in ice cream, then the purpose is mainly for coloring, and in this case it's then a question if the product is selectively extracted or not. So it can be either then considered as a coloring food or as an additive color, and in this case it has then the paprika has then to be labeled with the E number 100 E160C.
Okay, thank you, Zilka. So now we would like to move to our second group of questions, which we would put under the heading of other markets. By markets we mean other countries, regions or territories, and to consider the what might be the implications of the guidance notes. So the first question we have is exactly that, is do you expect that the guidance notes will have an impact in other countries or regions? So please, Zilka.
Yes, I would expect that the guidance notes have an impact on other countries and regions. The definition of additives within the European legislation is similar to the additive definition in the Codex Alimentarius, which is a worldwide standard, and many countries of the world use this standard for their national legislation.
So now we would like to go to the topic of labeling and consumers, to consider the requirements for labeling, and then of course the information that is provided to consumers via the label. So some questions under the heading of labeling and consumers. First question is, other than the labeling mentioned within the presentation, where we spoke about the prefix coloring food and then the raw materials in the brackets, the question is, are there other options for labeling? So Zilka, maybe you could take this one.
Yes, there are other options. So the labeling, which we have explained to you, coloring food and then in brackets the raw material, this is our labeling recommendation for the best practice. We think it's important that this labeling the consumer will get then an appropriate information to indicate for which purpose this ingredient is used. With regard to the European food legislation, so far there are no specific labeling provisions for coloring foods. It's of course regulated in a general sense that the labeling should provide the consumer with a clear description of the ingredient, and that the ingredient should not be misleading. It is therefore currently possible to label the ingredients with the description also as concentrate, and then in brackets the raw materials, like for example carrot concentrate, without the reference to the term coloring food. However, at GNT we feel that for the consumers it's much clearer and better understood when the term coloring food is used for the label of the final product.
Yeah, so thank you, Zilka. Yeah, I would add a comment to this. I think we often receive the question from customers when we are visiting our customers whether it is necessary to indicate the purpose for which the colouring food is used, and I think we've clearly communicated that our best practice recommendation is to do so. I think we see that the colour of a product, so this somehow touches the consumer, we see that the color of a product is something that consumers want and expect. So color of a product is a positive attribute, and I think what's important to communicate is the positive attributes of what is used to deliver that color, and I think that's where coloring foods have a very important role to play. So that would be our perspective on the topic of indicating the purpose of coloring foods. Now we would like to move into a heading that we've called performance and application suitability, which is clear how these coloring food products work and how they deliver, and what is their suitability and durability. So the first question we have is, are there coloring food solutions for all color shades in all application areas? At GNT we have our well-established EXBERRY range of coloring foods, and within this range we have a complete rainbow of the color shades, and these are suitable for most application categories. For example, beverage, dairy products including yogurts, ice cream, confectionery, a wide variety of savory products, and of course many more. I would agree it sometimes may be difficult to generalize on such a question. I'm sure there are some applications where there are challenges, technical application challenges, maybe stability or shelf life challenges, and we understand that, and that's why we have our application centers positioned around the world to support any such challenges, and it's those challenges that drive us forward and allow us to develop new products and new solutions. So I think our application colleagues will love me for saying this. I would ask, if you have a challenge, please give us a try. So second question and final question under this heading is, how is the performance and stability of coloring foods compared to what might be used as an alternative, for example an additive color? In general, coloring foods, it is fair to say, perform equally to additive colors. In some cases they can actually perform better because of the nature of the fruit and vegetable, and this is with respect to performance and stability. But what is really important is to have a deep and fundamental understanding of fruit and vegetable used in combination, which is then connected with a very good depth of understanding of applications, and then the related industrial processing. So you have to consider the whole area of application and industrial use when getting the best performance out of coloring foods. But what we know from our practice and being in the market for, as we said in the beginning, more than 30 years, that coloring foods do work and do deliver. So of this we are very confident. However, if customers face any technical challenges or any issues, then we have our team of experts who are there to support and to take on any necessary project work or stability testing or whatsoever. So I would just again request, if you face any challenges, please don't hesitate to contact us. So the final area where today we would like to cover the questions, so we have 3 more questions. We would put under the topic relating specifically to GNT and specifically to the EXBERRY coloring foods. So the first question, which a few people have asked, I think we somehow already responded to this question within the presentation, but maybe we need to re-emphasize this as a key point. So the question is, do all EXBERRY products comply with the guidance notes? So Zilka, maybe you could take this question.
So, the answer of this is simply yes. All EXBERRY EXBERRY products do comply with the guidance notes, and they result in being classified as coloring foods.
So thank you, Zilke. And of course we will, in due course, when the guidance notes come into effect, which is the beginning of 2014, we will be communicating compliance within the documents for the specific EXBERRY products. So this will be following shortly. The second question we have is also a very interesting question, and goes deep into the detail of the guidance notes, and in fact goes back to the early days of the guidance notes when they were being developed. So the question we have is, in the beginning there were many discussions on the specific topic of spirulina, and what impact do the guidance notes have on spirulina or spirulina concentrate? So again, Zilke, maybe you could take this question for me.
Yeah. I have to say it's correct that in the beginning of the process of the guidance notes, there were lots of discussions about spirulina and how to classify this product as a coloring food or an additive color. In the fact of an additive color, it would then not be permitted because the color pigment phycocyanin is a not permitted additive color within the EU. So for this reason, also the Commission decided to perform a road test. In this road test, they have chosen in total 13 products which were on the market as coloring products, and they wanted to define the criteria for the term selective extraction of the pigments relative to the nutritive or aromatic constituents based on these products. One of the outcomes of the road test was also that all GNT products which have been tested, which were concentrates from spirulina, but also from other raw materials such as carrot, black carrot, elderberry, hibiscus, red cabbage, safflower, and pumpkin, that all these products were considered as coloring foods. So, in summary, the spirulina concentrate of GNT has an enrichment factor below 6 and fulfills the criteria of coloring foods of the guidance notes. And in addition to this, the road test of the European Commission came to the conclusion that also GNT spirulina concentrate was also coloring food. So in summary, it's then considered a coloring food, and this will continue.
Okay, thank you, Zilke. So we hope that information on spirulina is reassuring to any customers that are using our products containing spirulina, or also reassuring to any customers that might consider to use it. If you want any deeper or further information on that specific topic, then please let us know. The final question that we have today is again related to the future development of colouring foods. So the question is, will the guidance notes prevent or restrict innovation in the category of colouring foods? So from our perspective, we don't see that the guidance notes will prevent innovation. We think they give clarity and certainty. So they give a framework within which there is plenty of scope for GNT with our supply chain and process technology and availability of raw materials to innovate. So we think, to the contrary, that the guidance notes actually will support innovation and allow this category to develop even further. And going back to what we spoke about a few moments ago with some of the challenges, application challenges, where maybe solutions need to be found or need to be optimized, we now have a clear framework within which to do this. Also, there's an important point related to the source material. And I think, as you know, within the guidance notes in Annex 3, there will be, in due course, an annex of data for raw materials that can be used in calculating enrichment factors. In the absence of in the absence of Annex 3 being formally published, then industry uses published or literature values. And of course this also gives the opportunity for new raw materials to be considered, which later would be added to Annex 3. So there is an opportunity to add new raw materials. Of course they would have to be edible and safe foods. This is a precursor for colouring food, but we still think there are many opportunities. So our R&D and development team, they're very excited by the future prospects of further developing colouring foods. So this really is the end of our questions. We have covered, I think, the great majority of questions that we received, and hopefully those answers we've given have been helpful and insightful. I'd like to thank you on behalf of Zilka and myself for joining the webinar and to listening to the questions. We didn't want anybody to leave the webinar thinking that their questions hadn't been answered. So any questions that have been sent where we haven't covered them in the Q&A session, we will be responding to you directly with an answer to the question. So we will answer every question that we've received, and we think that's an important obligation of delivering the webinar. Now, at the end of the webinar, we would like to invite you to make a very short survey. It will only take a few moments of your time, and it will give us some important feedback. So from Zilka and myself and from GNT, we would again thank you for joining the webinar, and we would like to wish you a Merry Christmas and a very Happy New Year. Thank you.